Welcome to Mystery Bible. This week we are going to look at the Sodom and Gomorrah story. As we continue the study of Abraham, we see what is happening in his life. We started from 0, and last episode we were on 99, and we are still at 99. We're looking at this particular incident. There's a lot of behind the scenes information concerning what took place at Sodom and Gomorrah and to why it took place. The Bible itself doesn't go in as deep as the book of Yashar does, or even other sources that go deeper and to explain the culture that was being portrayed and lived by these people in the region of Sodom and Gomorrah. We know that in the previous war with Nimrod and a couple of the giants at the time, that Abram at the time saved that region, and the kings were allowed to go back and take control of that. But I'm excited about this because a lot of Bible teachers don't talk about the reasons as to why God had to come down and spend some time with Abraham to tell him what he was about to do. We looked at Abraham, we saw that relationship with God. He was praying for them, he was interceding on behalf of Sodom and Gomorrah. He started at 50, he came down to 10, and and God said, if there are 10 people in that facility, that area that is righteous, that is walking by faith as he is, that God would spare it for that 10. And as you and I know, that there were not 10 in there. And so, but we're going to take a back look at all the additional information so that you and I can understand the reasons why God came down and said, okay, enough is enough, because the Bible tells us that he says that the cries came up to heaven, and he sent these 3 representatives to take a look at that. We're going to look into those 3 representatives as well to see who they are. So we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to Mystery Bible. We are going to park it here for a little while in Sodom and Gomorrah. It'll probably take me about 2 or 3 podcasts, hopefully less, to go through this particular place, Sodom and Gomorrah. There's so much about it, and it's a shame that the church didn't spend enough time to really educate the body of Christ as to what took place here and why Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed. There is so much in the backstory in the book of Yashar, and also other books that you read, and you see what was happening with this particular region at the time. We talked about briefly the last podcast. We talked about the intercession that was made upon behalf of Sodom and Gomorrah by Abraham, and how God couldn't find 10 people, but he told him, he made a promise to him. He said, if I find 10, I will not destroy it. We see that the word 2 angels went down to Sodom and Gomorrah to check that out. And there is a lot of misunderstanding with that word angels, because the interpretation is men. And you'll see as we go into the study a little deeper into this place, that there's always, when judgment is coming, there's always 2 witnesses that the Bible talks about, and that is why they were there. And We see it in this particular story in Judge, in the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah, and we also see it in Revelations chapter 11, verses 3, where God says that He will send His two witnesses. And we see that these two witnesses, as you and I will get a chance to look at, they actually represented the eyes of God. He's sending them on His behalf to check out what the cries that has risen to heaven, if it's true or not. That's basically how it's laid out. So these two witnesses is very important, especially when it comes to biblical teaching and the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah and the entrance about these two guys, because when those two witnesses come, after that is judgment, and the Bible tells us that that's same thing is going to happen to us in Revelation after these two witnesses come. So there's a lot of questions as to who these two witnesses were, these two men, and we're going to look into some of that, some of the Jewish traditions on that, and we will also gather information from other sources to put this together. But I want to take you guys to Deuteronomy 17, 6 through 7, and read this so that you'll get an understanding of why these two witnesses went down there, and to show you that it's within, the Bible says where two or three are gathered. When two witnesses are gathered is kind of like a seal. So let's go take a look at that, and then we're going to read Genesis chapter 19. I'm going to read it in the Bible, the King James Version, and then we will stop because it is it's verse 24 when God pronounce or the judgment of God actually begins, and there's scientific proof as to what happened there as well, that it was a comet that broke up in the atmosphere, and it actually fell on Sodom and Gomorrah at the time. And so that's where you have the aftermath of when a comet hits. Number one is fire and that brimstone kind of approach to it, the smoke and the burning. That is when because the atmosphere broke up into pieces while it was coming into our atmosphere and rained down on Sodom and Gomorrah, and there is scientific proof as to when that happened. I actually saw a video many years ago depicting this specific situation, and they can pinpoint the time when that comet came in, broke up, and so forth. So there is evidence out there to prove that this is what happened with Sodom and Gomorrah. But let me read to you briefly Deuteronomy so that you could see what I'm talking about these two witnesses. It's actually profound information. Whosoever is deserving of death shall be put to death on the testimony of two witnesses or three witnesses. He shall not be put to death on the testimony of one witness. The hand of the witnesses shall be the first against him to put him to death, and afterwards the hand of all the people. So you shall put away the evil from among you. And that is in Deuteronomy 17, 6 through 7. We see that that is what God does. Before a judgment of this magnitude, there must be witnesses, and God set up the law, and that's how we move and live by. Verse Deuteronomy 19:15 says, "One witness shall not rise against a man," or the Hebrew for my studies is ish, "concerning any iniquity or any sin that he committed. But by the mouth of two witnesses or three witnesses, the matter shall be established." And so we see that these two witnesses is very important. And I had mentioned to you also in Revelation 11:3 talks about the two witnesses that are coming in the end of days. And I will give power to my two witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. And that is in Revelations 11:3. And we see that these two witnesses again are going to show up when before judgment comes in the end of days, where the end of the end of our age, the age of grace, it is called. And then we go into the age of the millennium age, which is next. I actually did a study on this thing a few podcasts before. It's called the seven ages of God. And I think you guys should listen to that again. And so you can get a fullness of the timing of God, because the Bible tells us that He speaks to us now through the ages, and as if we understand the ages, then we will know what is God's plan for the time and the season. As I mentioned to you, that it is believed that these two men are not angels; it is actually men. And in Genesis 18, it starts and he says, "And Abraham saw God coming towards him by Mamre, a strong tree, as he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day." And again, this was a couple of days after he got circumcised, so he was in pain. So he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, three men, Enochim, plural for Esh. Remember I mentioned to you, Esh means man, who coming to him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them, and bowed himself to the ground and said, "My Lord," or "my Master, Adonai," Lord, he said. And that word is in the Hebrew, Adonai, Master. "If I have now found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant." Genesis 18, 1-3. Now the two angels came down to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When he saw them, he rose to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face towards the ground, and he said, "Hear my master Adonai again. Please turn into thy servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet, and that you may arise early and go on your way." And they said no, but he insisted. He actually just kept pressuring them, and they finally agreed. But if you look at the terminology that is mentioned here, it is about men. So let's take a quick read on Genesis 19, and then we'll go from there. "And there came two angels to Sodom at the evening, and Lot sat in the gates of Sodom. And Lot, seeing them, rose up to meet them." And so he gets up. There's actually, when you say that a man is in the gates back in the days, means that his position was one of importance, where he sat within the gates, or the rulers would be a part of the gates, where men of renown would sit there and talk and all that type of stuff. So here he was in this gates. And I remember I told you guys, when he walked away from Abraham, it was a connotation also that he had turned his back on God, and he was pursuing the way he wanted to live. So, and he said, "Behold, my lords, turn in, I pray you," and again that word Adonai, "your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and you shall rise up early and go on your way." And they said, "Nay, but we will abide in the streets all night." So their intention was to stand on the streets all night in the midst of this particular place. And we'll talk about where these men were. They were actually partying in another part of town. When they found out that these guys were here, these two men, they came to grab them. And he pressed upon them greatly, and turned unto him, and entered into his house, and he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. From this scripture, people surmise that it was the Passover that he was celebrating. They came around the Passover time. It was considered the time of year. Remember, they said the set time that they will come back again around the set time, which is in the Hebrew culture, is that set time is called time of life, and that's what he had mentioned here in 18. So let's keep going, and we'll see what was happening here. So the unleavened bread, but before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round about, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they called unto Lot, and said unto him, Where are the men which came in into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. And again, that's sexually, that they were pressing around. As I mentioned, it tells you here that they came from someplace, so they were at another party, and I'll explain to you later on. We're going to where they were partying, and they came here, and they are now wanting these two men here, Lot. And Lot went out unto them, and shut the door after him, and said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Don't do this. Behold, now I have two daughters, which I have known, which have not known men. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do you to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing. For therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. And they said unto him, Stand back. And they said again, This one fellow came in to sojourn, and he will need to be a judge. Now will we deal worse with thee than with them. And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and came near to break the door. So they're condemning Lot. They said, Look, we're going to take you out. And he's fighting them to prevent them from breaking into his house. But the men put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house, then shut the door. So the two men in the house pull him into the house. And it says that they closed the door. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. So here they are, struck in blindness, and still they're consumed in that lifestyle, in that mentality. And as I mentioned, we're going to study this so we'll understand what was going on. And the men said unto Lot, Hast thou here any besides son-in-law, and thy sons, and thy daughters? And whatsoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place. For we will destroy this place because the cry of them is waxen great before the face of the Lord. And the Lord sent us to destroy it. So the angels are now telling him, not the angels, these men are now telling him why they're here. Get your people out, because we are about to destroy it. God sent us to see if this is the cry that was coming up, if it was true, and we can declare that it is true. And because it is true, you need to get out of here. And Lot went out and spake unto his son-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But he seemed as one of mocked unto his son-in-law. So his son-in-laws, he had no influence on them. They were just laughing at him. And when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, saying, Arise, take thy wife and thy two daughters, which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon him again, and upon his wife, and upon the hands of his two daughters, the daughters being merciful unto them, and they brought him forth and set him without the city. They had to force this man out, basically. And it says, and it came to pass that then they were brought them forth, brought to they said, escape for thy life. Look not behind thee, neither stay thou in any of the plains. Escape to the mountains, lest thou be consumed. So the order was to get to the mountains, get up. But Lot said unto them, No, my Lord, let me stay. Behold, thy servant has found grace in thy sight, and thou hast magnified thy servant, which thou hast shown unto me in saving my life. And I cannot escape the mountains, lest some evil take me and I die. Well, here we go. Behold, now this is the city that is near. Let me flee unto it, this little one. And so they let him go to Zoar, which the name means little one. After he got there, judgment begins. So we'll be right back after this. I just wanted to give you guys the update as to, I wanted to read that piece of it, and so you can see the background. And then when we come back, we'll go in a little deeper about the story of what's going on with Sodom and Gomorrah. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Mystery Bible. We're going to pick up now in the book of Yasher. I'm going to read Yasher's account, and I don't think I'll be able to get into all of the details in this particular part of it, but what I'll do is read Yasher's account, and then next podcast we're going to really break it down as to what was going on here, so that you can have a good picture, because there's a lot of things that we do today, holidays that we celebrate in today, that was a part of this this culture at the time. So I'm going to break on that, and I'm going to go in next week. I'll do a really good in-depth study as to the two witnesses. I just basically give you a preview of it so that you can get a taste of it. So what I'll do is focus on the two witnesses. We're going to go through as to who the Jewish tradition believe that they are, and then we will go and break down the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah, so that you can see how it lines up with today. And it is some profound stuff that is in here that happened as a result of this. So we know that Abraham and had just been visited by these three angels, as it says. But when you look at the language, the original language, when you study and you go deeper into it, it talks about men. And especially when the two men go to Sodom and Gomorrah, it is actually the interpretation is two men went there, because how he spoke to the men, God is not considered a man, so it says God is not a man. So, but when Lot referred to him, these men, he referred to them as men, not the angels. He referred to them as men. So we're going to go into that in the next episode. But I want to just briefly go through and give you the account that is in the book of Yasher, and this is found in Yasher 18. After Abraham spent time with the angels, when they said that they'll come back and Sarah will be pregnant and so forth. And we'll pick it up in 18:11. In those days, all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah and all the whole 5 cities were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord, and they provoked the Lord with their abominations, and they strengthened in aging and scornfully before the Lord. And their wickedness and crimes were in those days great before the Lord. And they had in their land a very extensive valley, about half a day's walk, and in there were fountains and waters and a great deal of herbage surrounding the water. So this is a beautiful place. And all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah went there 4 times in the year with their wives and with their children and all that belongs to them. It actually says that they go there with their servants and all of that stuff that they go there. And when you study when you do your study here, you'll see that it is basically the we call them the summer. They were worshiping the sun god, and as Christians, we kind of blended that religion into ours, and it is really, really interesting how this plays into Christianity today. And that's why I say to you guys, Christianity today is Western Christianity in many ways is a pagan religion, because we have blended paganism within Christianity, and we'll talk about that later. In verse 13 it says, and all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah went there 4 times in the year to basically sun worship. This is the summer and the winter solstice and the spring and the autumn equinox. So this is when they went down with their women, children, and all belonging to them, and they rejoiced there with timbrels and dance. And in the time of rejoicing, they were all will all rise and lay hold of their neighbors' wives, and some the virgin daughters of their neighbors, and they enjoy themselves. And each man saw his woman or his wife. The word word wife in Hebrew is basically woman. Saw his woman and daughters in the hands of his neighbor, and did not say a word. So you have this partying going on in this valley, and they're celebrating the different solstices, and this one this is believed to be in the springtime that this one was going down. And so we're going to go a lot into that in the next episode, but I just wanted to keep you guys abreast as to what that was. So here they are, they're partying, basically having a good time, and in the midst of all of this partying, that's when the angels came, these men came, these 2 witnesses came in, and after they found that out, they went up to Lot's house. But let's continue reading the testimony here. And it says in verse 14, and in the time of rejoicing they would all rise up and lay hold of their neighbor's wife, and some the virgin daughters of their neighbors, and they enjoyed them. Each man saw his wife and daughter in the hand of his neighbor, and did not say a word. And they did so from morning to night. And they afterwards returned home, each man to his house, and each woman to her tent. So they always did 4 times in the year. Also, when a stranger, so in addition to that, departing for 4 days, four times a year, in addition to that, it goes on and it says in 16, also, when a stranger came in their cities and brought goods which he had purchased with a view to dispose of there, the people of these cities would assemble, men, women, children, young and old, and go to the man and take his goods by force, giving a little to each man until there was an end to all the goods of the owners which he had brought in the land. So, in addition to partying the 4 times a day, they when people came into the village, and they would basically take everything from them, take all their whatever they showed up within that city. They would take it and split it around amongst each other. Verse 17, and if the owner of the goods quarrel with them, if the strangers quarrel with them, saying, what is this work which you have done to me? Then they would approach him one by one, and each would show him the little which he took, and taunt him, saying, I only took this little which thou didst give me. And when he heard this from them all, he would arise and go from them in sorrow and bitterness of soul, when they would all arise and go after him, and drive him out of the city with great noise and turmoil. So we see this was a crazy place, man. So, and we continue in verse 18. And there was a man from the country of Elam, who was leisurely going on the road and seated upon his ass, his Cadillac of the days, or his fine car, his BMW, however you want to put it, because he was a man of means. So he had some money on him. So in those days, when you got some money, you bought the ass, as they say, which carried a fine mantle of divers colors. See what I'm saying? And the mantle was bound with a cord upon the ass. And the man was on his journey, passing through the street of Sodom. And when the sun set in the evening, and he remained there in order to abide during the night, but no one would let him into his house. And at that time there was in Sodom a wicked and mischievous man, one skillful to do evil, and his name was Hedad. Hedad was the baddest of the bad, as they say. And he lifted up his eyes and saw that the traveler in the streets of the city, and he came to him and said, whence come you? Where are you coming from? And where are you going? And the man said to him, I am traveling from Hebron to Elam, where I belong. And as I passed the sunset, and no one would suffer me to enter into his house, though I had bread and water and also straw and provender of my ass, and am short of nothing. So, like I mentioned, this guy has means. So he then sees this. He wants, and this is what he does to him. And so when he had brought him into his house, and took off the mantle from the ass with the cord, and brought them to his house, and he gave the ass straw and provender, whilst the traveler ate and drank in his house, and he abode there that night. And in the morning the traveler rose up early to continue his journey, when he had said to him, wait, comfort thy heart, and with a morsel of bread, and then go. And the man did so, and he remained with him, and they both ate and drank together during the day. And when the man rose up to go, and he that said unto him, behold, now the day is declining, thou hadst better remain all night, that thy heart may be comforted. And he pressed him, so that he would tarry there all night. And on the second day he arose up early to get away, and he that pressed him, saying, comfort thy heart with a morsel of bread, and then go. And he remained and ate with him also a second day. And the man rose up to continue his journey. And he that said to him, behold, now the day is declining, remain thou with me, comfort thy heart, and in the morning raise up early and go thy way. And the man would not remain, but rose and saddled his ass. And whilst he was saddling his ass, the wife of Hadad said to her husband, behold, this man has remained with us for 2 days, eating and drinking, and he has given us nothing. And now shall he go away from us without giving anything? And he had said to her, be silent. And the man saddled his ass to go, and as he headed, as he asked Hedad to give him the cords and the mantle to tie upon his ass, Hedad said to him, what sayest thou? And he said to him, that thou may my Lord shall give me the cord and the mantle made for the divers color, which thou didst conceal with thee in thy house, to take care of it. And he that answered the man, saying, This is the interpretation of thy dream. The cord which thou didst see means that their life will be lengthened out of the cord, and having seen the mantle colored with all sorts of colors, mean that thou shalt have a vineyard in which thou wilt plant trees of all thy fruits. And the traveler answered, saying, Not so, my lord, for I was awake when I gave thee the cord, and also the mantle woven with different colors, which thou didst take off the ass to put them in for me. And Hadad answered him and said, Surely I have told thee the interpretation of thy dream, and it is a good dream, and this is the interpretation. Therefore, now the sons of the men gave me 4 pieces of silver, which is my charge for interpreting the dream, and thee only I require 3 pieces of silver. And the man was provoked to the word of Hadad, and he cried bitterly, and he brought Hadad to Sirach. Sirach is a judge, so he's taken him to court now. This is a judge of Sodom, and the man laid his cause before Sirach, the judge, when Hadad replied, saying, It is not so, but thus. And so Hadad is telling his story now, and he begins to lie, and he says, The man Hadad tell thee the truth, for he is framed in the city of the accurate interpretation of dreams. And the man cried at the word of the judge, and he said, Not so, Lord, for it was in that day I gave him the cord and the mantle, which was upon the ass, in order to put them in his house. And they both disputed before the judge, the one saying thus the matter, and the other declaring otherwise. And Hadad said to the man, Give me 4 pieces of silver, that I charge my interpretation of a dream. I will make any allowance, and give me the expenses of the 4 meals that thou didst eat in my house. And the man said to Hadad, Truly I will pay thee for what I ate in thy house. Only give me the cords and the mantle which thou didst conceal in thy house. And Hadad replied before the judge, and said to the man, Did I not tell you the interpretation of thy dream? The cord means that thy days shall be prolonged like a cord, and the mantle thou wilt have a vineyard in which thou wilt plant all kinds of fruit trees. This is the proper interpretation of the dream. Now give me the 4 pieces of silver that I require as of compensation for what I make thee now allowance. And the man cried at the word of Hadad, and they both quarreled before the judge, and the judge gave orders to his servants, who drove them rashly from the house. And they went away quarreling before the judge. When the people of Sodom heard them, and they gathered about them, and they explained against the stranger, and they drove him rashly from the city. And the man continued his journey upon his ass with bitterness of soul, lamenting and weeping. And whilst he was going along, he wept at what had happened to him in the corrupt Sodom. And the cities of Sodom had 4 judges, and it goes on in chapter 19. We're going to pick up chapter 19, and when we come back next week, because again, it goes into more detail as to what this place is doing. They are murdering people. They're stealing from the poor. It goes on and on. And the cry of the people came to God, and God began send His witnesses. And the 2 witnesses, as I read to you in Deuteronomy, will come before judgment. So I want to thank you guys anyway. I wanted to say this before I go. I want to thank all my supporters, for I'm praying for each and every one of you. And this year, I'm praying that God, we're going to talk about it. It's about the blessing of Abraham. And I'm praying that blessing would be manifested in your life this year, because the Bible tells us the effectual fervent prayer of the righteous man availeth much. We saw that Abraham was praying for a city. God entertained him. And I'm praying for each and every one of you and your families that this year will be the year that the blessing of Abraham will manifest in your life. And the Bible says the blessing of the Lord brings wealth without any sorrow. And I want to thank you guys for supporting me, and I want you to come back, subscribe. Those that are here for the first time, invite friends and family so that we can learn about who we are, so that you and I can be effective for God in this world. Thank you for listening to Mystery Bible. Let's walk through the Bible and learn of God and His beautiful mercies and all that He has provided for us, that we may become effective for His kingdom and change this world. Check in every week for a new episode. Search for Mystery Bible on Anchor FM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Castbox, Breaker, Outcasts, Radio Public, and many more.